In this video, I'm going to break down how to get conversational in a language in 3 months. And I'll break down my process that I used to speak Spanish, which I was using when I was around people in Argentina, when I was going on dates, and just communicating with people. So let's define conversational first. Handling basic social interactions, ordering foods, asking for directions, being able to speak for at least 30 minutes about familiar topics without switching back to your native language. So let's say that you're one-to-one with someone, you're hanging out, you want to be able to maintain a flowing conversation. And being able to understand at least 80% of what native speakers say in a slow, clear speech. Do you need to live in this country? Generally, the answer is no. Maybe there are some exceptions, but skills can be replicated without living in the country. So we can learn how to speak. We can definitely learn how to listen, read, and write. We can definitely learn how to speak if we take some classes or do some exchanges. So we can supplement it with a couple dozen lessons to bridge the biggest gaps. We use writing to supplement the speaking skills. And if you don't have the money to pay for lessons, you can always do a language exchange for free. I'll teach you for 1 hour if you teach me for 1 hour. Okay. So again, just deeper diving into the conversational aspects. You make mistakes, but you get your point across. You talk about everyday topics. You understand the main points. You make mistakes, but still manage to keep conversation going. You can ask and answer questions to get basic information or express needs. If we want to get to a higher level of conversational, you express ideas clearly. You handle abstract topics, emotions, culture, opinions, and hypotheticals. Conversations flow naturally, even if you pause for words. Mistakes happen, but they don't block communication. Okay. Is this possible? Well, I looked at the language frameworks for European or for languages, and B1 to B2, which is conversational, B1 is conversational, for these languages takes 150 to 200 hours. For the other languages, it would take more. I believe we can shave some hours off of this process simply by doing some extra background listening and having the right mindsets. But yeah, if you put in if you're putting in maybe say 2 hours a day for 3 months, you can definitely hit this target. Okay. You could probably hit these category 2 languages. Now, these harder languages, Russian, Hebrew, Turkish, Arabic, maybe not. Okay. Maybe you're on the wrong video. But it's definitely possible with Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, French, so on. Okay. Now, mindset, briefly, we want to drop the limiting beliefs and mental resistance. Use efficient methods rather than just passive learning, like just watching TV, just listening in the background. But we do want to add background listening as well. So in this tutorial, I'm going to show you the method via a flowchart, which I have. Okay, so I've got this nice little flowchart. I'll show you the tools, the software, the resources. Now, your language might need some different resources, of course. And yeah, we're going to get right into it. Okay, so part 1 is pronunciation, flashcards, and grammar essentials. Flashcards is for vocabulary. Okay, so first off, we want to start with pronunciation. Pronunciation is very important because it's going to be the building block of being able to listen and being able to speak correctly. Because if we learn pronunciation later, we're going to have already learned saying things in the wrong way. Listening is going to be much trickier. So I do recommend doing with a teacher. So Preply is a good website to have teachers. Now, of course, you can always just go YouTube and pronunciation practice, whatever your target language is. Now, I am bilingual just by nature. I grew up in a household that speaks a second language, plus I learned English just growing up. I'm living in New Zealand, so that I'm basically natively bilingual. And then I also do a lot of music stuff, so I have a pretty good ear and a pretty good way of replicating sounds. So for me, pronunciation was never a big struggle. Of course, I did get some help, but wasn't something I needed tons of help with. Okay. So yeah, pronunciation is going to be important. We're going to focus on the sounds, being able to replicate it, being able to identify it. Okay, that's really like the first step. The second step is really getting as many words in your brain as possible. Okay, because imagine this: you're you're like reading a book or something, and you're like, you don't understand every second word. Or you're trying to listen to something, you don't understand every second word, or even you don't understand less than that, right? How is this going to benefit you? Like, you're going to be struggling so much. Okay. Now, this is why I recommend doing flashcards. Okay. I know it's painful and tedious, but in the beginning, this is extremely effective to gain a base. Okay. Whether that's 500, 1,000, or ideally 2,000 words, it's going to be an amazing starting point. So, this is going to be a bit of a grind this is going to be a bit of a grind in the beginning, but this is going to pay off, because then when you do jump into these materials, these videos, books, so on, you're going to have like a huge advantage. Okay. So um, now you can do these in conjunction, right? Like, you don't have to just get to 1,000 words and then go into the next steps. But this is going to be like step one, something that you want to get comfortable with implementing. Okay. So I don't know if you come across this, but if you know what flashcards are, but let's just Google it. So we've got flashcards, which is basically having two sides. Okay, they don't show the second side, but basically you have two sides where you flip over the card, and then it says something on the back on the back side. Okay. So like, for example, let's say I'll show you in the app. Let's say I have this word, this verb, ayudar. Okay. This means to help. So it flips the card over, to help. This was easy. Next one is cantar, to sing, and so on. Okay. Now let's say you're using this app. It's going to use an inbuilt algorithm. It's going to use an inbuilt algorithm where it gives you the words you struggle with, the cards you struggle with, more often. Okay, so if I put this as fail, this would show up much sooner than it would otherwise if I put easy. Okay, so easy, I might see it in a couple days. Fail, I might see it in the next 10 minutes again. Okay, to wish, preguntar, to ask. Now, this is just one way of doing it. A lot of people benefit from putting this into sentences. Okay. Now, I'm not going to tell you what to do. You might find it more useful to just isolate the words. You might find it more useful in sentences. That's kind of up to you. So I'm going to show you another example. Okay. I work in a restaurant.
Trabajo en un restaurante. Trabajo en un restaurante.
Using a microphone, but this will say trabajo en un restaurante. Okay. And now you can actually hear this out loud.
Trabajo desde casa.
With flashcards, ideally you have some sort of software or some sort of way to reverse it, so that, let's say you're going from Spanish to English, that you also go from English to Spanish. That way you're training not only your recognition, but your active recall. Okay. Now, in terms of actually getting these cards, there are two ways you could go about it. One is downloading Anki decks. Okay, so you're going to type in Anki deck 500, or let's say 1,000 most common words in Spanish. Okay, I recommend ankiweb.net. It's a very solid resource. And you can just download these. You might need to sign up, but you can download it. And then you can import it in one of these Anki apps. Okay. Now, the other alternative is using ChatGPT to create your own. So I'll just use a small subset as an example, but give me a list of 30 words and 30 most common words in Spanish with the English translation in a CSV file. So CSV is like one of these spreadsheets, okay? Give it a moment. And it shows. Okay. So it's got these words, it's got a list. So essentially one side is going to be, these are like two sides of the flashcard, right? The Spanish, the target language and the English. And again, I'm just using Spanish as an example. This is going to work in French and German, so on. Okay. So yeah, and then you can import these as a CSV file, text only 2 columns. But moving on. Okay. So we've covered the flashcards, as many words as possible. Now, it's probably going to be a bit tiring, so maybe you want to break this in as part of your practice. So doing like 15 minutes of flashcards combined with a bunch of extra things. Okay. Now, when you come across a sentence in the flashcard, try to change the verbs or the nouns. Okay. So as you get more and more familiar,
Estudio. ¿Cómo?
let's see. Okay. So we have where do your parents live? Okay. Which is ¿Dónde viven tus padres?
¿Dónde viven tus padres?
But let's say that you now already know a few other words in Spanish. Okay. Let's say you know a few other words. Like, for example, we take ¿Dónde viven tus padres? Okay. And now we can put it as ¿Dónde están tus padres? Where are your parents? We can say, where do your brothers live? Maybe you could just use tus padres and you could say cuántos. You probably wouldn't say this. How many parents do you have? Okay, that's a little bit strange. But the point is that when you're going about these flashcards, don't just do it passively where you just say like, okay, I know this. Actually be like, okay, I know this. I can change the sentence. I can adjust it. I can say the apples are blue or yellow, manzanas son
Las manzanas son verdes o rojas.
amarillas or azules. I can actually change things around rather than just being passive about it. This is how to really optimize your flashcard usage. Just to add one thing, what you can use is a technique called mnemonics, which helps you memorize a word. So using an association where you do like a story. So for example, the word for shirt or for shirt is camisa. And what I did was I imagined myself spilling miso soup, Japanese miso soup, on my t-shirt and leaving a stain. Okay. Another word for the floor is el piso. So I imagine myself pissing on the floor. It's a bit vulgar, but this is what really makes it stick. Now, I've also got a video on mnemonics, so check it out. Okay. So going back to the next step. So we covered pronunciation, we've covered flashcards. We're going to go into some real grammar essentials. Okay, so learning to speak in the present tense. Okay, so I've got this Spanish verb tenses, but we're going to focus on this one specifically, the present. Okay, so we're going to focus on some really, really basic stuff, like some really introductory grammar. So I would say learning how to speak in the present tense. Um, we're going to focus on the bare bones. Okay, so being able to speak in the present tense, that's really like one of the first things. Okay, so this is a chart I used to teach my students. When you're using a verb, you want to describe how it's being used, who is using it, who's doing the action. So let's say like I want to say he speaks, she speaks, and then I'm going to put in it follows these patterns where it's I speak, you speak, he speaks, we speak, formal you speaks, and they speak. Okay, so we've got this pattern, and I want to memorize these patterns because it's going to be the building block of learning. The real fundamentals of speaking in the present tense, and the present tense is the most common tense, at least in Spanish. Your language might be different. I don't claim to know everyone. So yeah, here I would memorize these sorts of things. Now, there are going to be other important, really, really basic concepts. You can ask ChatGPT to break it down for you. But you have, for example, to be, you have irregular verbs, you have gender and number, like instead of saying the apple, you say the apples, which is manzanas or las manzanas. Okay. Um, past tenses is going to be a definite next step. But yeah, we're going to focus on the present. Okay. Now you could also get a teacher for this. Now, once you've got, a list of words committed to memory, you're able to come up with some basic sentences just by changing little things, little verbs here and there, little nouns here and there, changing the adjective, right? We're going to move on to slightly more complex stuff. So now we're going to write the sentences from scratch. Actually, I would rather focus on the reading first, okay? So here is more like part 2. We focus on the reading. So for this, we're going to go into the AI. And let me copy this prompt. We're going to start with topics that interest you. And we're going to put them at a basic level. So if you remember the B1, the B2, it actually goes A1, A2, B1, B2. So we're going to put like things at the very, very beginning, okay? And we're going to do as much reading as we can. So give me 300 words or give me 100 words on how to make coffee at level 1. And under each paragraph, give me the English translation. Okay. Please bold the English translation and leave a line break. Okay. So if you follow the process up until this point, you're going to already know this word, coffee is going to make sense. This word, like these words are already going to make sense, right? And you're probably not going to have come across molido, which is ground. But now just by reading the sentence, you can actually associate this together, right? Going on, most of these words you're already going to know. These ones, maybe you'll come across something like filter. Here, this is a little harder than A1. Yeah, like you'll probably have already come across 80% of these words at least, right? Um, okay. And you'll just be able to associate the words that you know or don't know. Now, I would recommend doing longer readings, like, okay, give me 500 words this time. Okay. And again, we're just going to go through this, and you're probably going to know most of these words. This means homes. You might have known this in your first 1,000 or 2,000 words. But again, you're learning most of these words, and then you're going to keep maybe a mental note. For me, I recommend just keeping a mental note. Unless you really struggle with a word, just keep a mental note. If you really do struggle with some words, put it in a flashcard or write it down. And just keep reading. Do this every day. Like pick similar topics. Okay, so we're going to start off with something like making coffee, and then we're going to change making coffee to making tea, and then we're going to change making tea to boiling water, and we're going to change boiling water to making pasta, and then we're going to change making pasta to making pizza, um, to cooking, to so on, right? So we're slightly changing the topics each time, and you're having this association. And, if you're doing 20, 30 minutes of this day, it's like an hour of this a day, like your vocab is just gonna increase so rapidly, and you're not even gonna need this bullshit flashcards. You're not even gonna need flashcards because you're gonna be reading so much. And if you do practice a little bit of reading out loud, which I highly recommend, your pronunciation and your ability to speak and communicate in ideas is going to come out much more naturally. Okay, you're going to have this flow. Even if you're just reading it like straight off the page, not coming up with any original content, you'll develop the muscle of speaking. Okay. Okay. So yeah, we've got the words, we've got the topics. You're committing them to memory with English. Now, a good exercise to combine with this is translation exercises. So I prefer to translate from native language to target language because you're still probably going to be thinking in your original native language. Okay. So then I'd be like, give me a basic sentence to translate level A, let's say level A2, about making coffee from Spanish to English. All right. So I'm going to do these exercises. Sorry, from English to Spanish news. Okay, how this is tough. Caliento el agua antes de ponerlo sobre el nido del café. Okay, so there's a bunch of mistakes here. Okay, so here's the correct one. Caliento el agua. So we can see that we've made some mistakes. So I used the wrong gender. I put the order in the wrong place. Okay, I made a typo, right? And here it's gonna give you an option to, if it doesn't, just ask for a deep dive. Okay, so yes, please. Okay, so these are some of the very sort of basic grammar concepts like personal pronouns. Now, you're going to be able to pick up a lot of grammar if you just do these translation exercises and you find out where the biggest gaps are. Okay. So I was doing translation exercises all day, every day, combined with the reading all day, every day. Um, and once you get to that, like at this point, you're already strengthening your vocabulary. You're building a strong level of fluency with reading. Okay. And now we can move on to listening. Now, you don't have to wait to do this. But reading is going to make listening a little bit easier. Okay, so here we have this channel. It's called Dream in Spanish. It's a decent resource. I wouldn't say it's a perfect resource, but it's a decent resource to get started with learning Spanish. If you go for something else, different languages have different resources. Okay, now one of the things you have to keep in mind is that listening to these it's very tailored to learners. And that's both an advantage and a disadvantage because it's tailored, so it's easy. It's kind of meaning um, it's not representative of a native speaker. Okay, so they're gonna be speaking slowly, they're gonna be speaking clearer, they're gonna be using more basic language, which is fine. Whereas with native content, you're gonna have things that are, different accents, like thicker accents, less neutral language, more slang. And in my opinion, you should do a bit of both. Okay, so if you just listen to native content, that's fine. But in my opinion, it's probably going to be overwhelming, the level of difficulty trying to follow along with what's going on. Okay, like listening to these is already going to be a challenge because you're going to be coming across new vocab. You're going to have to pick up on the sounds. You're going to have to, you know, store things in your memory, like the whole entire word. So, like the whole entire sentence with a bunch of words, and then try to kind of translate it back to your native language, and then be like, okay, this is that, that is that, and it's going to be really mentally demanding. So that's why I recommend starting on this type of sort of learners content. But do listen to a bit of native content too to get exposed. But yeah, what like you do what you want to do. um, so I'll just show you what this is like. Okay, I recommend.
Michelle, le gusta Sofía. Sofía es muy bonita. Sofía es muy linda. A Juan le gusta.
Wrong with using subtitles. Eventually, yeah, you don't want to practice without them, but there's no reason not to use subtitles, okay? Because you're already learning, you already have so many challenges. Once you do get confident with subtitles and being able to pick up a few words here and there, then use them less and less, okay? Or what I like to do was I had my phone and I had the subtitles on and I kind of like turn the phone away. I wouldn't look at it. I just kind of listen. I'd turn the phone around and look at it when I needed to. I'd rewind it and I'd look at it. And yeah, with this listening, do it while you cook, do it while you clean, do it while you go for walks, while you work out. Like listen as much as you can. Even if you're not like 100%, even if you're kind of listening in the background, it's going to add up over time, right? I used to try listening a little while doing while doing translation exercises. A slight cut here, but I've got a video on breaking down listening into subskills. So this will just help you get better at listening by working on subskills. So things like sound discrimination, passing, and so on. It's going to be in the description, okay? Now, here's one more thing I wanted to cover before, which was the writing. Okay. So there's this guy, Mikkel Hyperpolyglot. He calls them language islands. But basically, you're going to pick. Okay, so you have this. What type of workouts do you usually do? Do you prefer working out alone with a partner? Have you ever stayed motivated to? How do you stay motivated? So, yeah, you can pick one of these sections each week or every 3 days or whatever. And just learn how to ask questions and answer questions based on these topics. So as an example, we'll go with these three. I'm going to put it into AI. Okay. I'm going to put this into AI. I'm going to do blah, 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 like I've put in my answers. Me gusta correr. Prefiero. Okay. I prefer to train alone most of the time. I need to get backed. I love running. Right? Now you've got the answers, you've got the translations here. Now, taking it a step further, I would recommend using a text to speech software. Okay, so turning this into sound so you can not only read this and write this and say this, but actually hear it. Okay, that way you can listen to sentences that are most relevant to the topics that you're interested in. Okay, so if I put this into something like 11 Labs, this is a paid service, but you can start with as little as $5 a month. Then this actually creates an audio file which I can download.
¿Qué tipo de ejercicio sueles hacer? Hago principalmente ejercicios de fuerza
To the mic.
y algo de cardio.
Now you can listen to the native speaker recordings as you're reading the sentences. You can combine it with flashcards. You're really just getting some listening practice here.
Concentrarme mejor. ¿Cómo te mantienes motivado para hacer ejercicio con regularidad? Me motivo pensando en mis
If
metas
you follow this process,
y los beneficios para mi salud.
you'll learn a ton of words to get a base. You'll know how to put the words into sentences. You'll understand basic grammar concepts. You like the present conjugation. You're gonna know how to read. Your vocab is gonna expand like it's on steroids. You're gonna know how to come up with. You're gonna be able to actively recall because now you've actually practiced writing in the language because you've done translation exercises. You'll have done more of these exercises, talking about topics, being really conversational, really developing that conversational fluency here. And your listening is now starting to develop. Okay, so you can actually understand what people are saying and come up with creative responses. Okay, so now once we build these skills, the next step is actually speaking. Now, before we jump into speaking, one thing I would add is what you could do is when you're listening to some type of native content, um, you pause the video and then you kind of say something that could come next. So let's say someone is talking about how they are cooking and then they're like saying, let's say you're watching a cooking show. Okay, first, I want to cook some eggs. Okay, first I crack the eggs. Okay, what do you do next then? You mix the eggs, right? So how do I say that in my target language? Me mezclo los huevos. Okay, I mix the eggs. Now, what do we do after this? We put the butter in the pan. I can kind of predict this already, but now I've got this prompt of me actually listening to something in the language, and I'm predicting. I'm kind of coming up with some dynamic, spontaneous speech based on what I have in front of me for inspiration. Right. So that way we're always training a conversational skill without actually speaking to someone because we're just continuing down the same train of thought, but, going on different paths, different tangents and expanding there. Okay. Now, this is the point where if you haven't already gotten a teacher, this is when we're going to really focus on the speaking. Okay. Okay. So just to touch again, we have platforms like Preply where you can go and schedule lessons in your target language. So let me just take a look. Let's say we wanted to learn French, because French is such a romantic language. Okay, you can filter by price. Obviously, you want to go for a quality tutor over the cheapest tutor. But just to, give you an example, there are teachers from $3, $5, $7. Like it can start pretty low. Um, Now, you could also go for an international teacher. You don't have to go for a native teacher because an international teacher would have studied the language and actually really like broken down the grammar and stuff. So, um, having a native teacher is great, but it can also have its cons if they don't actually understand things in detail. So with speaking with the teacher, um, yeah, practice talking about different topics, ask for feedback and correction. What I recommend is using something like I'm using software here, OBS, or maybe like voice memos or like a voice recorder in general. And then get you can get a transcript. You can use a transcribing software and transcribe what your conversation was. So then you can spend more time reviewing it afterwards in detail as well, if you like. And you can get a further breakdown by AI. So I can put this file or this text into ChatGPT and it give me like a breakdown of where I make mistakes and so on. Okay. So yeah, speaking with a teacher recommends like an hour a week, like an hour to a week at this point. Um, get lots of feedback, get lots of correction. At this point, you really, really hammer the grammar that's lacking. So I imagine by now you probably would have come across some, if you've done all this reading and stuff, if you talked about some of these topics, like what did you do last weekend? And you'll probably have come across some more of the tenses, like you would have come across preterite. Maybe you would have come across imperfect. Maybe you would have come across like these, like for example, in Spanish, right? Like it's going to be different. And we'll expand on this in a sec. But at this point, at some point, you would have run into this preterite a lot. And then, yeah, you should have just spent some time dedicated to actually understanding it and replicating and writing it and in your classes actually speaking it. Okay, so like in the present tense, we have your hablo, I speak. Here we have your hablar. So we just study these patterns and we can do brute force memorization. We can do flashcards. We can use specific exercises in ChatGPT. So I could be like, I want to practice the preterite. Please help. I was very polite with ChatGPT and AI. Okay, so it's going to break things down. It's going to explain things. Okay, test me now. And a common thing is mixing things up, use AI to tell you where people make the most mistakes. Like these two are both past tenses, and learners mix them up a lot. Okay. Okay, so like for this one, yo fui, ellos, mind blank here because I'm, ellos compraron, tú dijiste, let's see. Okay, perfect. Okay. I was anxious not to make a mistake here. Okay. Number 4, let's see. Number 4. Okay, I'm gonna make a mistake on purpose. Vivido. Feedback in English, by the way. Okay, so I made a mistake here. Okay, so constantly using AI to help you explore the gaps. So if you follow this, like this grammar, as you go through these different steps of learning vocab, learning reading and writing, you're kind of going to naturally pick up the grammar here and there. Okay. Now, you do need to spend a bit more time deep diving and studying this. But you don't necessarily have to just like study grammar, textbook, and then, learn how to speak and read and write, right? You can do this at the same time as you're reading, writing, speaking, learning new language. So kind of like this is kind of like a little dynamic circle where we'll rewrite this one. It's basically like a dynamic process. Like, you're doing a bit of this, like let's say you're reading, the vocab is your weak point. So you focus on really improving that vocab, maybe do flashcards, whatever, maybe you listen and read specific texts and then you keep improving your listening, keep working on the sounds. Then maybe you can recognize a lot of things, but you can't actually express yourself. So then we're going to focus on writing more sentences, thinking more, right? And then we realize we can't express what we want to say. So then we're going to put a bit more time and energy into the grammar and so on. Like your process might look slightly different, but this is something, like a basic framework I've come up with. So in terms of actually picking like the grammar that you want to work on, I'd say just for being conversational, there's going to be the 80-20 rule. So there's going to be some things that are grammar needed to understand, and we're going to have grammar needed to speak. Okay. So there's going to be a lot of things that, okay, there's going to be a grammar nice to have and like a grammar needs to have. So for example, in Spanish, if we have this estar or ser, which both mean to be, but one is more temporary versus permanent. Like if you mix these up, it's a little unelegant, but you're understandable, right? And also if I mix up, like, let's say I mix up, like we have genders, we have La agua, like maybe I mix up la agua and I said el agua, or maybe I said la pero instead of el pero. It's like unimportant. It's like unimportant. Of course, you do want to learn this to an extent, but it's like this things doesn't matter. All right. So this is like grammar nice to have. Maybe I should make this a orange light. And then we have this like grammar needs to have. Okay. So like for here, I would need to say using the past tense versus the present. Because if I want to say last week I went to the doctor, it's just going to be so much easier to use the right way of saying it rather than saying it in the present but last week. It's very jagged. So we're gonna distinguish the nice to have, the need to have. Okay. What else could be like a need to have? Like, personal pronouns. Who is doing the action? Is it him, her? Like, it's going to be very confusing if you say they walked the dog when it was in fact you that walked the dog, right? What else? Okay, like this is just an example. We don't need to keep going. So now in ChatGPT again, I'm going to say like, give me the 2080 most important grammar concepts to be understandable and conversational. In Spanish, we could say up to a P1, P2 level. Okay, just to be a bit more specific. Now what you could say is, my goal is to hold a 30 minutes fluid conversation with a native speaker. They can slow down for me. But let's assume they don't speak my language. Okay? Perfect. Here's the 80-20. Okay. Present tense, very important. Past tense, different type of past tense. Future. I'd say these aren't strictly 2080. So this is pretty important. But yeah, you can come off ChatGPT, maybe do a bit further research on what the most important grammar concepts. Be explicit. I just want to be understood, understand. Don't care if I sound elegant. First goal is communication. Okay, so we're going to have like the bare minimum. Okay, it gives me the same stuff. I think you get the point, right? So then we can start focusing on these grammar concepts. This you should have picked up in the beginning. These, hopefully you picked up along the way. Service estar, these are simple questions, donde vives. Okay, so this is going to be a general guideline for learning a language. Okay, in 3 months or so, depending how fast you are, depending how much time and energy you put in. There's a lot more we could talk about. We could really deep dive into different aspects. This isn't like a step-by-step process where I tell you do exactly this for this many steps, but this is a general overview, a general guideline. Now, I do have also a couple of resources in my YouTube channel, which I'm building out. Sorry, I've got a lot of different videos. Oops. This isn't a how to become. Okay, so this one is about using tense drills. These are just like further techniques, further exercises you can do along the way. This is like, okay, so we're gonna wrap up the video here. I messed up the editing a little with the sound, just in a few places here and there very briefly. But if you like this, do drop a comment. Let me know what your questions are, what your challenges are, what your concerns are. And yeah, like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.